Hello and welcome to Alchemists.camp, where we become better Elixir programmers by building things. And today we're going to take a look forward and see what it's going to take to build out a Phoenix app, actually the first Phoenix app that we've done on this channel, from the StatWatch module. Now, if you're not sure what that is, I highly recommend you go back and check out the previous videos where we built it up from nothing. But the basic idea is it's just an OTP app that goes out and logs statistics from a few services. This is one version of it. So it's going out every 6 hours and it's logging how many YouTube subscribers this very YouTube channel has, how many videos are published, how many times they've been viewed, how many Twitter followers the Alchemists Camp Twitter profile has, and the Alexa ranking of this site. And as you can see, the numbers get better over time. The original version of this was actually just making CSVs. So it was a command line app that would go and get all this information, and then it would output it into a CSV that you could download. And I'm not actually going to download this because I've already got too many of them on the system, but that's the general idea. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this, which is basically just this standalone little process that's going out and doing this stat fetching all the time. We're going to take this and we're going to build out a whole web app. People can sign up for it, create an account, they can look at their profiles. It's easy to add more pages to the site, like an about. Each person can track multiple different profiles. So for example, I've added one for Alchemist Camp, Alchemist, there we go. And it's only logged one day because this has just been launched. I've got a different one for my old blog. So as you can see, it's just a more full-featured app. It's more flexible, it's easier to work with. This stat logging module right now on Alchemist.camp. So Alchemist Camp is not made with Phoenix. It's actually just the Erlang Cowboy server and a little bit of a Phoenix-like framework that I've been building in previous videos. If you want to see those, you can check out the playlist called Building Alchemist Camp. But anyway, it's going to require some changes in how things are organized. So let's take a look at the code. I'll full screen this. So this is the main router, and as you can see, it looks kind of like what you'd have in Phoenix, although it's not quite as nice. Got to do some pattern matching. But basically, this is what's handling everything except the static assets. And there's an episode controller, a page controller with some pages, and the stats are also getting handled by the page controller. So you can see this is using an OWL router. This is a knockoff of Phoenix. It's super bare bones though. The router is just a bunch of macros that get injected for your convenience. The view is kind of the same kind of deal. And the controller is also that kind of deal. Page handler is basically just dealing with Cowboy. And I'm not going to go through everything in the app because I have already covered it in earlier videos, but just for an overview, these are the moving parts. The application.ex is the entry point. That's where we start up everything. And you don't see anything here, but if you look in the mix.exs, we do have Cowboy and StatWatch as our dependencies. Then back in our application, you can see we've got some static routes being handled, and everything that doesn't match those gets kicked off to that router that we looked at the very beginning. Okay, so that's basically what's going on with Campsite. StatWatch is in a parallel directory to lib, and in its initial version, there was no repo file. It was basically just an application EX and a scheduler. The scheduler doesn't do a whole lot. It just calls statwatch.run every so often. It was initially every 6 hours. And then the application just has a worker that we start, which is the scheduler. Not much going on here either. Then all the heavy lifting was done in the StatWatch module. Initially, it was writing out CSVs in here, although when Campsite was running it, the CSVs were going out in its priv directory. I believe I've got a few. So here we go, just adding lines to a CSV every so often. But then I extended it to use Ecto, so we had to add this repo file, and there's some schemas for profiles and for stats. The profiles were basically just the set of the URL and the Twitter and the YouTube, and then a name that goes with it. And the stats were the actual pieces of information collected. So as you can see, there are a number of pieces, and we're going to be putting all of this together inside of a Phoenix 1.3 app. And Phoenix 1.3 apps have a web directory and a normal directory. So we'd have one directory that's StatWatch, just like this one is, and then we'd have one that's StatWatch Web. And since Phoenix generally has its own schemas and so forth, we're not just going to have everything in one flat directory like this. So here's the basic plan. And this is a bit, I understand. So first, we're just going to generate a new project. We'll have to like rename this one to StatWatch Old or something like that. We'll make a new one. Then we'll generate users and credentials for the users of the web app. The credentials will be things like email address and password. And then we'll run our Ecto migrations. Then we're going to copy these schemas from StatWatch into a new directory we call core, and that's going to be a context. So we'll have an accounts context and a core context. If you're not familiar with the context, don't worry about it. It's just an organizational thing that's in Phoenix 1.3. It's instead of throwing all of your schemas into one big dumping directory, you break them up into logical groups. The core group will just be the stuff that comes from our non-Phoenix StatWatch app, and then users and credentials are going to be related to accounts for the web app. Then I'll copy the migrations that StatWatch had into the migrations directory for the new Phoenix app so that they get run and we end up with those tables in the database. There are going to be some things to do with change sets and migrating an application. Then we're going to copy everything from StatWatch's application.ex and put it into Phoenix's application.ex. Or I should say the new Phoenix apps application.ex. And then there's some cleanup, some minor changes. Got to add in some guards if we're opening it up to everybody on the internet instead of only me. And then we'll copy the scheduler, which was right here. We're going to copy that into the same directory as the application.ex. So these will basically, this will just go straight over into the Phoenix app, and it'll look similar. It'll still be called the same thing. Then we'll copy these deps that are in the current mix.exs into the Phoenix app, and we'll copy the worker into the application so that it starts up the scheduler. Same kind of deal. So we're up through here. This is a lot of this section is just copying stuff that exists in StatWatch into the new app. And then we'll have to do some work just setting up how user accounts work and how users create profiles and make the forms, make the routes, make a view for the stats. Basically just the normal kind of wiring you have to do in a web app. Then we'll add sessions, and we'll add authentication and password hashing. And then we'll create an auth controller, and this is just going to have a bunch of convenience methods that we can use as plugs, so that from any other controller of the app we can say, restrict the following actions to logged in users, or restrict them to admin users. Or in the case of, say, a user profile, it's totally reasonable that you can look at all the details of your user profile, even if you're not an admin, but you can't look at anybody else's. So we'll have 3 levels of authentication, I guess 4. Logged out, logged in user looking at their own things, and then admin user. And yeah, then there's associating the profiles with the users, and then limiting visibility of things, as I just mentioned. So this kind of goes up with the auth stuff. Some amount of styling. As you can see, I didn't do a whole lot. And then finally, I've got some deploy instructions that I copied down from my notes from last time I deployed. And we could add social sharing, could add emailing, especially emailing for account recovery. This is a lot of stuff to do, and it's going to take a multiple video series, but this is the basic roadmap to go from this to something like this. And with that basic planning out of the way, we are set to jump into the code next video. Until then, I would recommend just poking around the site a little bit, thinking about what it's going to take to make it. And another thing I would really recommend, if you haven't done it yet, is go through the Phoenix starter guide and just make the simplest app you can. Well, basically just make the tutorial app. So if you go to the guides, then up and running. So try making the basic app and just get through whatever pains might be involved with setting up your database and all of that. If you get stuck on that, just leave a comment. Like, leave a comment on the site or ask on Twitter or like wherever, and I will try to help you. And once you've gotten your basic starter app up, then maybe think about what it would take to get to this, and very soon we will be started on that video series. So until then, happy coding and see you next time.